No sooner had we settled the case than the client was whinging and wanted another bite of the cherry. Let's talk about settlement remorse. Hey, it's Terry Gorry, and this is the Irish Law and Small Business Podcast. I talk about settlement remorse. We all can suffer from time to time, suffer remorse. There is such a thing, I believe, as settlement remorse. That is, you're involved in a hearing, you're involved in a case, and you're acting for either the employer or employee, and the question of settlement or compromising the claim, the proceedings, the dispute comes into being. And my client, for example, might suffer from settlement remorse. In other words, they will feel that even though they settled it, and they might be, if they're an employer, paying out a certain amount of money by way of compensation, they may feel that, if the hearing had gone ahead, we might have avoided this and we might have won. However, the corollary is also true, that if the hearing had gone ahead, it could have gone badly and the payout could have been even more, significantly more. Now, what you're getting with a settlement and what you're getting with a compromise is obviously certainty. In other words, you can accept and know and recognise that the proceedings are at an end, the claim is at an end, it's going to cost you X, you sign an agreement, and that's it. So you're getting certainty. It's a bird in the hand situation. The two birds in the bush situation then is, if the hearing had gone ahead, if the claim had gone ahead, if the court case had gone ahead, I would have won more, or I would have won the case and not have had to pay out so much or whatever. And that's always something that you need to weigh up, but you never have when you're going to court or to the WRC or to the Labour Court, certainty. So there's always a risk. And so you weigh up the potential risk, the potential attached to your case, the potential of winning and the risk factor in winning, the probability, and you multiply that essentially by what you could have to pay out, and you weigh it up. So if you have to pay out perhaps, and you've weighed it up in terms of assessing the risk factor, 15 grand, and if you can settle the case for 5, well then obviously it's a no-brainer that you're going to settle for 5. Whereas if you go for the 15 and you lose, you pay out 15 obviously and you're worse off. However, if you go for the case and you let the case come on and you have the hearing and you win, well then you don't pay out anything. So you might have avoided having to pay out 5. So that's the risk-reward ratio. But recently I was coming back from Dublin and we had settled the case. I was acting for the employer and he had exhibited a certain degree of remorse afterwards, and it seemed to be no matter what was done he would have been remorseful anyway. So had we gone ahead he would have been remorseful obviously if we lost, and if we had settled for a lesser amount he would have been happier, and so on. But there was a certain element of remorse about the settlement, even though in my view it was a perfectly good deal. But it was one that my client wasn't coerced into. He had a chance to weigh up the pros and cons and had a decision to make, and it was on the table. He could settle it or he could go ahead and fight the case, and he chose to settle it. There was, as I say, a certain element of settlement remorse afterwards. And there was the element of, I should have paid less, or we should have gone ahead. But these are the decisions that you make, and you will always ruminate and think about the decision that you arrived at and always wonder, was it the right one? But you're better off probably just accepting it, making the best decision you can and moving on. But ironically, I'm listening to a podcast at the moment about hip-hop music and the intersection between hip-hop and law and incarceration and jail, and it's the intersection of rhyme and music and rhyme and punishment, essentially. Not crime and punishment, but rhyme and punishment. But in the particular episode I was listening to coming home from a hearing in Dublin, the episode was to do with a plea deal that was offered to some of the young hip-hop guy, and all of his mates took the plea bargain, and they were each getting 7 years or whatever. This guy was a murderer, actually. He had pulled the trigger, and there was a number of murders against him, and he was offered though 15 years, and he wouldn't take the deal. He was offered 15 years. He went ahead then to full hearing, full trial, and he has been jailed for 189 years in New York State. So that's, when you look at remorse, when you look at settlement remorse, when you look at being offered a deal and not taking it, sometimes you're right not to take it. Sometimes it can go disastrously wrong. And when you are experiencing settlement remorse, perhaps you should consider that guy who was offered a 15 years, and as a young hip-hop gentleman going to court and being prosecuted, coming out of prison obviously after 15 years, he's probably going to be still in his 30s. He'll still have a life, whereas he threw up that deal, refused it, didn't accept it, went to full hearing and fought the law, and essentially the law won. He was, as I say, convicted and sentenced to 189 years. He will never see the outside of a prison or a correctional centre. So the next time you might be considering remorse about a decision you've made, or indeed about compromising or settling a WRC claim or a labour court claim, or indeed any court claim, then if you're experiencing remorse, you should consider the type of remorse that young fella in New York State Correctional Centre is experiencing. Thanks a lot for listening, and don't forget to subscribe so that you won't miss an episode. And I'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a review on Apple's iTunes. It gives great encouragement and lets me know that I'm on the right track. Thanks a lot.